I know that you, if you were in here early enough, then you saw the announcement video. We were talking about things coming up, but I want to make sure you guys catch a couple things. The first one is this week, the special schedule with Wednesday night. There's no regular services in here, the gathering or any of the classes, youth or children. But on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we have something we've been doing the last 3, 4, 5 years. I don't even remember how many now. Kind of a prayer journey. You see the little tables with the Beatitudes on them throughout the room. It's a drop-in, you can come be a part of this. One of the things that we hear every year, there's usually a couple hundred people that kind of come in and out on that night as they say, I wish I'd come last year. So I want to encourage you to be a part of Thursday night as you prepare, and you don't have to be here long. You can stay as long as you want. But to come and do that and just kind of set your heart for the weekend and be ready for what's coming. I mean, our Holy Week is kind of the Super Bowl for us as believers of what happens beginning today through next Sunday at Easter. Also, Friday night's Good Friday is the Good Friday service that will begin. All this information is in the bulletin on the website, and then Easter Sunday. Also, Easter, your neighbors, your friends, maybe they are far from God or have no history, no relationship, they're expecting you to invite them. And Easter's kind of we get a pass. Nobody looks at us weird for inviting somebody to church on Easter Sunday because this is the day. And so we would encourage you and challenge you, if you've got somebody in your life, invite them, give them a go. We will not bite them, I promise. Well, unless they're in the nursery, then somebody could get bit. So just so you know. Well, we're going to continue in our series and the Beatitudes, but a number of years ago when our daughter, who's married and out of college, but when she was, I believe, Ashley and I were talking about this, we believe she was a 4th grader, was a part of the Girl Scouts. And if you've been in Valparaiso very long, we got a great little town. I mean, it really is pretty good, and we've got a lot of opportunities that happen, and one of them is downtown during the Christmas celebration that they have. They bring in the live nativity scene, but for the Girl Scouts that year, and I don't know if they still do it or not, they asked the Girl Scouts to come carol. So there were the dads and the moms and grandparents. We all gathered around to listen to the girls sing, and they were doing the Christmas caroling, and we had the hot coffee and hot chocolate, and we're listening. And the newspaper, our local newspaper, came down and was taking photos and putting it in the paper. But there was also, they asked some of the girls, and Kara Ann was one of them. They pulled them aside for an interview. She was so excited, and the parents everybody's there. They're proud. They're getting to see this. And the reporter said, the girls, what would you like for Christmas? So whatever the hot video game or doll or bike or whatever it was, they were going down the line. And then Kara Ann, her moment. This is posted in the paper. Little girl, what would you like? She goes, my name is Kara Ann Evans, and I would like for Christmas world peace. Oh, please. Oh. World peace? Are you kidding? Hey, you're 9. I would have been asking for, I need a treasure chest of money, okay? Or whatever. But yeah, so she says world peace. I mean, even children understand that they want and crave peace. We do. And we have seen, if you watch the news, where there's stuff is going on all around us. Well, leaders from around the world were concerned about the same issue, about peace. In the aftermath of World War II in 1945, a group of world leaders got together and they formed the United Nations. And it was brought into existence for this one reason, that they wanted to create world peace. They wanted to make sure that another Hitler would not arise again from the ashes and try to take over and dominate the world. And so this one focus of the United Nations from 1945 till today was to create a non-violent world full of peace. Not one day from that moment has there been complete peace on earth. Not one. I mean, their motto that they set out in 1945, to have succeeding generations free from the scourge of war. Free from the scourge of war. Not one day, it's been a pipe dream that there would be no war, no violence, that today would be a day of peace. So in Matthew 5:9, when Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be children of God. So why would Jesus talk about being peacemakers while living in a world without peace? I mean, why would Jesus even talk about it if it's not obtainable? I mean, is it even fair that he could even bring that up to us? Is it even fair that he could even speak about this, that blessed are the peacemakers? I mean, we know that children are craving it. We understand that. We understand as adults that have grown up, you understand we crave peace. If anybody have ever served active military, you've been the parent as a child that was off fighting the war or serving their country in whatever generation, then every one of us crave peace. No matter how good the cause, we all crave peace. And, frankly, I think Jesus really has a sense of humor. I mean, there are times throughout the New Testament when he would speak that he would say things that I think if we were there, we would have kind of in the back just gave a little chuckle. This may have been one of those times. Peacemakers is this term, but there was a greeting. The Jewish community and the Hebrew word that they would have used to greet one another would have been shalom. It also was a goodbye. It was shalom, shalom to you. It was meant peace. It also had some other connotations to it, but it was talking about that the peace would go before you and peace would walk with you. It was broad. It wasn't just that simple. But the Roman army at that time was also known as the peacemakers, the whole Roman army. Now, they were on the verge of taking over the world. J.D. Crossan was a theologian. He argued that Rome believed in peace through victory, that if they could conquer you, bring you into submission, beat you into submission, that they would take over, and that was a peaceful means. They were called peacemakers. When Octavian, who was the stepson of Julius Caesar, marches into the Roman civil war, and he defeats Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he ended the Roman civil war, and he was acclaimed as a peacemaker. He was honored as a peacemaker. Also, by the way, Octavian also had his stepbrother put to death on the campaign because he saw him as a threat. So the early Christians in that time, however, they believed in peace through justice. They believed that there was something about righting wrongs and treating people differently, particularly the least of these, to treat them with dignity. So was Jesus just being funny? Was he just using irony to call us out and to say, you're to be peaceful? You're to be peacemakers, a nickname given to the Roman army. So did Jesus really ask us to be peacemakers on earth, knowing the challenge and the difficulty that that would mean? Now, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but relationships are fragile. People are fragile. We're sensitive. We spend a great amount of time in our lives working with people, communicating, human connection, interaction, working on our relationships because they are fragile. They're sensitive. I mean, even if you did not believe in Jesus, if you came just to get somebody off your back today and you were in here just to kind of buy your time and get out of here, so if you have no faith history, no church history, no faith in Christ, whatever level, you probably crave peace. We all do. We all want it. We all want something that will bring and just kind of let us be. And peace was important to Jesus. He knew deep down we would crave it. I mean, there are some people, you're lighting candles, you're listening to music, you will sit in the dark, you will do whatever it takes to kind of find some type of centered peace. But see, peace as God sees it is far more than the absence of something. It's far more than the absence of something. It's the presence of something. See, this Jewish greeting, this shalom that was kind of a welcome and a farewell is much more than just the word peace. It also means that he was encouraging to be whole or complete. It means that when I would send you away, that I would pray that God would completely engulf your life in all areas. So when we look at this, about this, what does this mean to be peacemakers? It's talking about this gap, this conflict that happens in our lives. And we've said this a number of times, but where conflict arises in our life is the gap between expectation and reality. So if your expectation is here and the reality where somebody delivers in your life is over the top, and that gap, it's good. If somebody over-delivers in your relationship status, it is good. If you order a small Diet Coke and they give you a large Diet Coke, it's a win, right? If you order a large Diet Coke and they give you a small, you demand justice. You pull the high school kid through the window at McDonald's into the steering wheel and you shake them. Do you see the difference? The gap is in the expectation and reality, and that's where conflict lives. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we are not always going to agree. I am sure that there are people in the room right now that you have disagreed with over things in the church. Just you've served in different teams, you're a volunteer in this area, and somebody said something, it agitated you. You had an expectation of what they should do, and there's a reality, and it's frustration. It creates conflict. There are also people in this room, I feel confident, you're out in the marketplace, you have a job, and you had to deal with people professionally, and they bother you. You know who they are. There's a possibility you're even sitting next to someone who irritates you. You rode in the car, you live with them, and they irritate you because we don't always agree. We don't always agree. Peace is not the absence of conflict as much as it is the presence of righteousness that fills the gap in our relationships and snuffs out conflict. Now, I told first service, and I'm going to come clean to you as well. My wife, Ashley, and I are in the middle of remodeling a home. We bought a house, and we gutted it and started and did all these things. Chances are good. We'll be done in a week or so. We're going to need counseling. I feel confident that we're on the fast track. It has been decisions and color and all of these things. And as it turns out, we don't always agree. As it just turns out, we just don't always agree. So we have to compromise. We have to figure it out. And here's what I would tell you, husbands in the room, men, the dating women, here's what I would tell you. If you want to avoid conflict in your marriage, you need to cancel your subscription to Dish or Comcast today. You need to get rid of HGTV. Yes, thank you. I'm with you in the back. You get rid of that baby, because I'm telling you, they make a 6-month project in 30 minutes, and you feel good about it, and then you convince yourself you can do it. It's a lie. It's a lie. All right? So that's just free. That's not even part of the message, because I love you. Cancel that stuff today. But conflict's not always bad. That's why we watch movies. That's why we watch Chicago MD. It's the conflict. It rises up. We want to see what happens. We want to see the resolve. It's not bad. Conflict's not bad. That's why we do these things. I love the way John MacArthur says it. He goes, peace is not just stopping the war. Peace is just not stopping the war. Peace is creating the righteousness that brings the two parties together in love. So when a Jew would say to another Jew, shalom, which is the word for peace, he doesn't mean, may you have no wars in your life. May you have no conflict. What he was talking about was he'd say, I desire for you all to have the righteousness. I desire for you to have the righteousness that God can give, all the goodness that God can give. Wow. We understand that life is hard. It's challenging. And shalom is this God's highest good for us, based out of righteousness. So if we are to be peacemakers, we don't only just stop the war, we replace it in the gap of conflict with righteousness. See, I love the way this was kind of written. It said that peacemakers are those who not only call a truce, but a real peace where all is forgotten. But a real peace comes in, that we embrace one another. We can't spend our lives avoiding conflict. Now, stick with me for a minute. There are some, I understand. I've talked to you. You enjoy a good scrap. You know, you love a good debate. It's healthy for you. You get it out, and when it's over, you're able to walk away and go about your life. That's just the way your family. But there are some of you that you were raised to avoid conflict. Because for whatever reason, conflict was bad for you. It was hard. And so what you did was you just flee. You know, fight or flight. You've heard that in psychology. You fight, you either step up and you go to war, or you flight and you're like, hey, I'll get out of it. Because if I don't hit it head on, then it's not about me. I can let it go and I can walk away and take it on over here. But there's some of us, we've spent our whole lives avoiding conflict, and it has cost us. It's cost us. It's cost you jobs. It's cost you family. There are family members you don't talk to today because you've avoided the conflict. There are people that in your neighborhoods you've avoided. There's probably spouses. There are probably some of us that we've lost spouses over our avoidance of conflict. Some of you have lost churches. You've left here or walked into someplace else because you've avoided conflict. See, there's a difference between desiring peace and wanting to be right. There's a difference between desiring peace and wanting to be right. For some of us, our desire to be right trumps peace. And God's talking to us about this righteousness, this gap that we get filled in our life between reality and expectation, where it steps in there and it says, let's desire peace. Let's desire peace. I mean, there's a difference between truce and peace. I mean, truce just says, I'm laying down my guns. Truce says when two sides call truce, we call it a win because they're no longer shooting at each other. But if I'm not shooting at you, then that also means I'm reloading my gun and coming up with another plan of how to shoot you better when the truce is called. But peace says, let's walk away. Let's embrace. Let's go after peace instead of just truce. See, peace is when the truth is known, the issue is settled, and the two parties embrace and can even go their separate ways. I had somebody talk to me in between services, and they said, hey, this deal stuck to me. Peace does not mean you're getting walked on. Peace does not mean you're getting trampled by family members that are taking advantage of you, not respecting you, not loving you. Peace just means you can be strong enough to embrace the conflict and tell somebody, I love you, but I don't need you. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to tell me how to live. I want to love you. And peace fills that gap because of righteousness. I mean, last week we talked about this pure of heart or seeking holiness. This week is peacemakers, because what we got to catch here is that where there's real peace, there's righteousness. Where there is real honest to goodness peace, there is holiness. And where there is real honest to goodness peace, there is purity. Because conflict is hard. It weighs on us. It hurts us. It's uncomfortable. It's time consuming. It's intense. It's scary. It's mysterious. There's something happens because there are people that believe. Now, I've had them, and I probably have been this person too. So maybe today I'm just talking to me. So y'all don't have to take this to heart. Just take it as words, because the guy gets to get up here and speak. But there are folks that they'll come in and state their case in conflict, and they say it, and if you don't agree with them, then they say, you must not have heard me, because only a fool would not agree with me because I'm right. Well, I didn't make it. That's not it. It's not it at all. It's hard. It's hard. So on that side of the mountain, when Jesus is sharing these Beatitudes, and I believe that from the very first one to the last one, they kind of build on each other, getting harder. As we talked about being meek and the righteous, and we talked about being pure of heart or seeking holiness. And now today we are at this moment where he's saying, I'm calling you out to be peacemakers because I want to call you sons and daughters. When he says, I want to make you that, everybody on that side of the mountain that would have been there in real time right then, they would have understood. I mean, there was the Romans. There were the Romans there. They didn't really care for Jesus. They were indifferent, but they didn't like him. I mean, they just like, whatever. There was the religious right who would not have liked this. The zealots wouldn't have liked it. He goes, blessed are the peacemakers. I mean, had Jesus really forgotten? Had Jesus, I mean, is there a moment that maybe in all the things going on in the world that he would have been privy to and all the things that he would have understood? Because even though he was fully man, he was fully God, would he have maybe his mind slipped a little? I mean, is it possible that Jesus would have taken his eye off the pitch, maybe a little, to say, had he forgotten how Rome had forcibly took the land from the Jews? I I mean, it was that he went in and Rome had waged war and slaughtered thousands. I mean, maybe. I mean, would he have forgotten? Had Jesus forgotten how Archelaus had slaughtered 3,000 Jews at the Passover celebration a few years back? I mean, had Jesus maybe forgotten? But I mean, surely to goodness, Jesus doesn't say, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and he had this stuff on the front of his mind. When that he would have said that Pilate and his soldiers had bludgeoned a crowd of Jews protesting the stealing from the temple treasury. I mean, had Jesus forgotten that Pilate massacred Jews on the temple ground and mixed their blood with their sacrifices that they were offering? I mean, had Jesus forgotten those things? Is it possible? Because that enemies that had been gathered around Jesus that day on the side of the mountain, when he was talking about being meek, being righteous, being pure. And now all of a sudden he says, being peacemakers to people that have abused us. I mean, how would he have done that? Well, 2 years later from this moment, about 2 years later from this moment, Jesus models what it means to be a peacemaker. See, that last week of his earthly ministry, that from today, what we call Palm Sunday or the triumphal entry, all the way to Easter, this week is Jesus' last earthly week on his body form on earth, serving in ministry. I mean, from that moment, he models it. I mean, from the garden the night that he was betrayed, he models it because Peter pulls out his sword and cuts the ear off the soldier. And Peter's ready to go to war with him. He's ready to fight, and Jesus says, put it up. It's okay. Heals the guy. I mean, even at the dinner when he's being betrayed and the plans are being corrupted, he's washing people's feet, his closest, and he knows what's coming. And maybe the biggest act of this is the one that he did symbolically when he rode into town on a donkey. I mean, in Passover, it was like the popcorn fest on steroids. I mean, this thing is huge, and it lined the city, and the people were there. There were vendors, there was meat roasting, there were vegetables, there was fresh fruit, there was flowers. It was the smell of spring, and people were excited about this. They wanted this. It was kind of a cross between a community celebration and a family reunion, and everybody showed up. And I think that from the hilltop, looking down on Jerusalem, you could have heard and catch the spirit of what was going on. Maybe even heard in the distant roar, Hosanna, Hosanna. I mean, these people are ready to celebrate. There's been rumors flying that the Messiah was going to reveal himself, and he was on his way to Jerusalem. So this tension is beginning to mount. There's a tension that's really festering here. There's this tension between the disciples know who Jesus is. They know who he said. They're still unclear of the purpose. And the crowd is starving for a Messiah, and they're waiting, and now's a great time. I mean, you can see it. You know what's coming. You hear things like, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. I mean, you came for the festival, you're watching a parade, and now the rumor has filled, a king is coming. A king is coming. Matthew 21, 1-5 says this, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, see your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So this is that last week. The crucifixion is just a few days away. It is coming. And Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. And despite the danger, because we said, Rome's had it. Anybody that declares that they are king and they're going to trump Tiberius Caesar, they're dead to Rome. Dead. There's no room. We can't have 2 kings. So Rome's not going to let this stand. They can't. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they've had it because this guy keeps saying he's the Messiah, and he's not the kind of Messiah that they wanted. The Zealots, done. They've had it because they want this political anarchy. They want us to take over Rome. It's not Jesus' agenda. But he's coming in. So why is this so significant that he comes in on a donkey? Now, prior to this day, Jesus had always walked with his disciples. We have nothing recorded that says that he rode on a donkey once before. Now, maybe he did as a kid. Maybe he did and we don't have it. But there's nothing else in Scripture that says he ever rode a donkey until this day. I mean, he ate with those guys. He slept on the same ground with those guys. He perspired with these guys. He walked the countryside for 2.5 years with these guys. Not one time did it say, hey, he rode on ahead of them. Not one time to say, hey, he had this donkey, and these other guys, they just fanned him as he walked up and down the aisles. Nothing like that. It just says, this is the time. Now, there were times he drew apart for prayer. He would slide out to the countryside by himself, but he always came back. There was no special privilege. There was nothing out of the ordinary. He was always with his guys. So when he says, now send him to fetch a donkey for him, there's something special there. So you got to wonder why. Well, entering the city on a donkey's colt was a simple way to symbolize a few things. The truth is that Jesus was in fact coming as king. When David's son Solomon took over the kingdom and moved into town, he came in riding on a donkey. So Jesus saying he's coming as king is not avoiding conflict because he's ticked off everybody at this point. Coming in on that donkey, saying to the world, I'm the king. Romans aren't going to let that go. Pharisees, Sadducees, they can't let that happen. The Zealots, they're ticked. They can't have this. So he's not avoiding the conflict. He accepts the title and accepts the people's praise because they're all cheering. He remembered that all these things that have happened. So now a far greater son of David is riding in on the donkey. A military king would have come in a chariot, on a war horse. He would have come in with an army, spears and swords drawn. But Jesus rides in on a donkey. So while he accepted the title of king, he refused to become the military Messiah that the people and even his disciples really wanted. He refused. So he accepts the title. He chose peace. He chose peace. I mean, even Jesus had specified the donkey was to be a young colt, unbridled, had not been ridden. And so that was symbolic because this animal had never been ridden. All of a sudden, Jesus gets on him, and he's okay being ridden. He's okay with it. So now, Jesus is not only taking his title as king, but he's a divine king. And this moves the parade from just being a political occasion to a sacred one. It's now sacred. This is something to behold. In Matthew 21, 6-9, it says this: the disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt. They placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. I mean, can you imagine what it must have been like for the disciples to be overlooking the Kidron Valley and seeing the city of Jerusalem? You can see all that's happening, and all of a sudden there's this pent-up hope of what could take place. This moment in the guys' lives to see Jesus as king. I mean, he was perfectly capable of walking on water. He was perfectly capable of feeding thousands. He was perfectly capable of healing the blind and making the lame walk. He was perfectly capable of all this. And now he comes in on a beast of burden as a divine king. He never did anything without a purpose. So these disciples and the crowds would have just gone ecstatic to say, he's coming in to do it now. He's taking his throne. And the disciples had longed for this. They wanted this. When he proclaimed himself king, everybody erupted. Soon the city was jammed. The roads were already completely pilgrims and locals alike. They would have started cheering and chanting for this moment. And they broke branches off the palm trees and started waving them in the air and laying them in on the ground. Now, the last time this had happened in Israel that we know of, the last time this happened was under independence about 100 years prior, when Judas Maccabee had led them to victory and got Israel's freedom and their land. His nickname was the Hammer. The Hammer. He had adopted the palm branch as a symbol of his victory. He put it on the coins. He put it as an image for everybody to understand. For everybody to understand who he was and what he had done. So when the crowd saw the palm branches, it was more than just convenience. It was more than just convenience. It was a symbol. It was a symbol to tell everybody else, freedom and peace are here. Hosanna. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna on the highest. Zechariah 9:9 says this, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So in this moment, we are there. We are there. Matthew 21:10 says, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? Who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. So as Jesus enters, the whole community would have erupted, and they asked this one question, who is this? Who is this? And I think that's a question you and I have to answer. It's a question you and I have to be honest about and ask ourselves, who is this? I mean, is he really going to be the Prince of Peace? I mean, this day in Jesus' life was significant in many ways. He knew the end of his ministry was coming. He knew what was going to happen in just a few days. He knew that this crowd that was all cheering for him and all about him and singing his praises and screaming for him was about to start yelling, crucify him. He understood that. He understood that the military people that were in charge that day weren't going to like him. He knew the religious right of that day couldn't stand for him. He knew the people in the crowd who were indifferent about him, that maybe knew a little bit, maybe liked him a little, but wasn't really sure what to do with him, that they were going to flip and flop on him in just a few days. He knew that. He knew that. He knew that. He also understood it was now or never. He had a divine purpose, because when you're a divine king, you have a divine purpose. And his divine purpose was to sacrifice himself, not to avoid conflict in the relationship, but to offer peace, because the only way you and I are going to get peace is through the sacrifice that he made by dying on a cross. Without it, you and I don't find peace. Every year, we're still gathering up sheep and bulls and doves to sacrifice to find peace. And all of a sudden, he understands what he's got to do. Because in Jerusalem, you got to go down and you got to come to these two roads, and it splits, and he has to make a decision right then. And you got to understand, even though he was fully God, divine God, he was also fully man. So he was God-man, and he could do this. I believe he had a choice. I think it was a choice that he didn't sin. I think it was a choice that he embraced this in this moment because it was now or never. And he decided to be obedient to his Father. But I think he had a choice, and at that moment, he could have just had a mere thought, and legions of angels would have come down and cleared the path and wiped Rome right out. I think with just a mere thought, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the other religious nuts, boom, dead. All he did was think it. He had a crowd. He had an army. He had motive because he understands the beating and the crucifixion is coming. He understood, but instead, he chose peace. Didn't avoid conflict, but he chose peace. He gave us righteousness. I read this story and then looked it up, and it's about this missionary, Don Richardson. And the story is that he was a missionary, and he wrote this book called The Peace Child. And as a missionary, he was working in Papua New Guinea with the Sawi tribe. And this tribe, as he was trying to translate the story of Christ, he did a really good job all the way through until the end. And at the end of the story, he could not find the right words to tweak to help the people. And this right word was, what do you do with the sacrifice that Christ makes on our behalf? And he said, no matter what word that I came up with, it just didn't fit. It didn't do it justice. And he said, I tried and I couldn't do it. Well, the Sawi tribe had enemies. There was another tribe down the stream, and they would battle. They would go to war against each other. They fought. And he said, but there was a custom that long before his existence, long before it had been passed generation to generation, the only way there would be peace between the tribes was if one of the tribes would offer as a sacrifice to the other tribe a male son. And that son would be raised by the enemy. Be raised by the enemy. And if he was raised by the enemy, as long as that son lived, as long as that son was alive, there was peace between the two tribes. When that son would pass or something would happen to him, war would come back. But he was the peace child. As Don Richards was writing this story out and he was sharing what was taken, he realized that he had his perfect analogy. He began to explain that the peace child was Christ, that he had come and given himself. The Father had given his child to an enemy tribe. The difference was that Jesus would never die, that he would live forever in eternity. So these tribes, as they would fight back and forth until a peace child was offered, a peace child was offered. That Christ is living forever, and this is our opportunity to accept a peace child. All their suffering, I can't imagine. I can't imagine what it must be like to be a father that has to turn over a son or a daughter like that. But I'm wondering if today, as we begin Holy Week, I wonder if there's people that need to accept a peace child. Now, I've asked Cindy to kind of play, and I'm going to ask you to stand, and I don't want to wait long, but I'm going to ask you to stand with me. That I believe there are people maybe in the room today that you've called a truce in your life. You've called a truce. You've offered a truce to family members or co-workers or friends. Maybe you've even called truce with God. You've just said, hey, God, I'm so angry with you about who you are and what you've done that I'm willing to call truce, but I'm not at peace. I'm not at peace. What better way to begin Holy Week? What better way for us to head into Easter by us coming clean? By us coming clean and saying, through your righteousness, I want peace. I'm not avoiding conflict. I'm not overdoing the conflict. I just want peace. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of being angry. I'm so tired of being hurt. I'm so tired of being alone that I want peace. I want a peace that is beyond all understanding. So I want to pray with you. And I've got some friends that have promised to come pray with you. I've got staff on both sides of the room that if you want to come while I pray, if you want to make your way, they would love to pray with you. Because today is a day you can have peace. So as I pray and you want to come and have someone specifically pray for you, now's the time. Let me pray.